And close the loop. Push the game out into the feed so that the feeds that are out there are interactive and part of the game experience and not just like banner ads.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're headed with Farmville and many of our games is making the interaction with the communication that comes out of the games mean something to other players of the game and to people who don't play.
Well, that's related to what point I was trying to get across about using a website creatively is that's using the feed as part of the gameplay. And so I think this is a trend that there's no blueprint, there's no playbook, but in a sense it's metagaming. That's why I think about it, is that you look at the environment you're in, whether it's on the web, and if you're, if you've got a console game, is your console connected? Is it there? And you think about that environment and all the different ways that you could use that and think about that as part of your gameplay. That's a worthwhile brainstorming topic, I think, for people.
It will also lead to games that are culturally viral, not just viral through whatever communication channels you're working with on a platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that probably has been talked about endlessly at GDC and not so much elsewhere are ARGs, and there have been lots of really cool ARGs, and I think conceptually they're really interesting. But if you start to think about does anyone know what I'm talking about when I say ARG?
No.
No one does. Should I? Alternate reality games where the game space kind of doesn't exist, and every way that you interact with it is kind of an intimation of what's happening in this fictional game space. Is that a pretty good description of it?
It's LARPing for mainstream people.
Yeah, okay. LARPing is mainstream.
Did that register?
So if you think about your game happening in a kind of a fictional place, then any communication that comes out of that fictional space becomes part of the game. So characters within your game are sending you emails, and it's really believable when you read an email from somebody because that's the way I interact with people in real life. I don't interact with Amy ever before this, but on Facebook, it's not like I talk to her kind of person to person all the time. I see this kind of evidence in pictures and in feeds and in messages of what she's doing, and I think that if you think of your game as sending those kind of messages to you, it becomes a really kind of interesting design process.
Okay, so right now we've got, at least over here in our part of the world, we have all these traditional publishers. And EA bought Playfish, so they're making a move in that direction. So aside from that, the traditional publishers doing traditional games, do you have advice for them, or where do you see it going with these traditional publishers? Are they all going to get bought by the Asian companies because of things like this?
That's a big question.
Yeah, so pick and choose what you want to answer.
So, I think that within the kind of social gaming space, it's definitely maturing. It's evolved really quickly over the past couple of years, but it's maturing, and I think it's going to get harder for 3 or 4 person social gaming shops to really break through, have explosive growth like lots of the kind of larger social gaming companies have had, Playfish, Playdom, Zynga. And so I think it's natural that there's going to be a lot of consolidation in that space. I also think that we're going to see similar things to what we saw in the mobile space. Brands are going to become more important. Discovery is going to become a little bit harder, and so brands are going to be important to our players. Are companies like Shanda going to come in and purchase U.S. publishers? I'd pass that to somebody else.
We can skip that part of the question if you want. We don't have to do that. And I do want to start encouraging questions if you have them. We have a microphone right there because we have a limited amount of time, and I know there might be some questions in the audience. Okay, so there was nothing more in that one. All right, let me get to one more question. So, if you could, all right. Well, we talked about if you could pick a game. No one really did pick a game. So if you had any, like that number one most important piece of advice, like either the biggest do or the biggest don't, we've heard a little bit, but if each one of you had that one single thing, can you just go down the line, what is that thing that the traditional publisher needs to know?
I mean, so for me, I think the most interesting thing, personally even that I wanted to get out of this panel was, out of, the social game mechanics, the social gaming world is a very unique world. The mechanics, as Mike mentioned earlier, it's about your real friends, whereas in Modern Warfare 2, you're playing against these people, and maybe a couple of them you actually know in real life. Maybe even if you're playing the same team or same guild in WoW, you have 100 people in your WoW guild, you probably don't have any of them as a Facebook friend, or maybe a couple of them. So what's really interesting and intriguing to me is trying to figure out what parts of the social gaming world is actually applicable to traditional games. What parts that make it so viral, that make it so engaging, that get people to invite their friends, that get people to discover games through their friends. Like that whole mechanic, I think is really interesting. And I think there are probably some things that you could take and convert into the traditional gaming world. And I think there are a lot of things that you can't. And that was one of the points that a lot of people made here, which is, Facebook is pretty much the dominant social gaming platform, and it's primarily an asynchronous platform, and thus a lot of the games are actually asynchronous. Whereas a lot of traditional games, it's all real time. And so when you try to take real time stuff that's going on from a social perspective and apply it to an asynchronous world, where seeing that your friend played Modern Warfare 2 an hour ago is really of no help to you. Like, what are some things that you could actually do? And from my perspective, I think the social platform, the real-time social platform that's existed for a long time is instant messaging. All of that's in real time, and instant messaging does have status. You can see when a friend is AFK, when they're listening to music or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I've always found it really interesting for traditional game companies to try to leverage instant messaging and the status that exists in instant messaging as a way to push discovery of games and potentially to acquire new users through people's social graph in instant messaging.
So if I'm on my console and I'm playing, Modern Warfare, just having the game automatically know to just put that in my status on my computer when I'm when I'm playing, just automatically do it. Because right now that's I don't know if anybody does that, or it's a small portion of people who do that, and it's just not in the mindset of game publishers to do that, to make that functionality possible. But you're saying that if you did have that connectivity that was just automatic, and most people who engage with your game did it, you would find a lot more discovery, a lot more social joy, if you will, around that game. It would suddenly get created instantly.
Yeah, and I think that is what Raptr does, right? So we interoperate with every instant messaging network: AIM, Yahoo, MSN, Facebook Chat, etc. And when you start playing a game, whether it's on Xbox or PC or Mac or a social game, the Raptr client actually picks it up and will broadcast that to your IM status. Now, you can hook it into Facebook and Twitter, but that is not an ideal use case for something like that. But I think what's really interesting is that it's actually the reasoning behind why a gamer would actually want to do something like that. And I think it's because ultimately for these games, like Modern Warfare as an example, you want your friends to know you're playing a game, number one, because you hope maybe that they'll pick up the game and play with you too. And number two, that they'll actually play with you in real time, right? If you hop onto a Modern Warfare server, you want your buddies to come play with you. And it is more fun to play with friends for any game practically. And so they will enable that because it actually is useful to them as well on a personal level and a social level. So we've definitely seen, and when people have integrated with Raptr, and we could actually do that detection without any integration with the game developer, but when people use it, the average person on an IM has about 100 friends, on pick your IM. So 100 of their friends will immediately see and learn that their friend is playing this game. I think that's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. I got it. Well, if you're